It is your Wednesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand, back at it for another day and a really good show coming up. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a minute to talk Gopher football ahead of their game in North Carolina, a big one on Saturday. Randy will be there. Chip Scoggins, my guest on Thursday's show, will be there as well. I will be there. I think I might have mentioned that once or twice. I'm going to be there as a spectator and checking that one out. First Gopher away game that I've been to in quite some time, but came at a good point in the schedule. Like I said, one of my really good friends lives out there, so a group of us are going out to watch that game, to hang out with him for a while. So really looking forward to that game, though, and just the test for the Gophers. Randy and I will get into all that entails in just a little bit here. Got some Twins stuff at the end of the show. Good win for them against Tampa, finally beating Tampa Bay, and kind of a marker of how they've done against good teams this season that could be a good omen, or at least a decent omen. Can an omen be decent? I don't know. A decent omen going into the postseason, which we presume is still going to happen. There's 7.5 games up now on Cleveland still. The games keep flying by here. That one getting more and more likely that they're going to win the AL Central and head into the postseason, but not sewn up yet, but feeling pretty good about that, I'm sure. First, though, what did I miss? Let's revisit two kind of tense moments, exchanges from Sunday and how they relate to the rest of this week. I want to start with the Lynx because we've covered a lot of Vikings. We're going to talk Vikings with Chip Scoggins tomorrow, leading into that big Thursday night game against Philadelphia. And we'll get into kind of how the Vikings adjust and how Kirk Cousins, kind of coming off of that game, adjusts and some of what happened in that game. I want to start with the Lynx, though, because the Lynx missed a big opportunity over the weekend. They lost to Chicago on Friday, and that was maybe no great sin. Chicago is a decent team. That was a game that they, could have won, but Chicago had plenty to play for. They were still trying to get a playoff berth at that point. And, so losing to a team that's got a lot to play for, sometimes that is just going to happen. And Chicago did, in fact, make the playoffs at 18-22. They are the 8th seed. The Lynx, though, on Sunday played Indiana, a team that had nothing to play for, was already out of the playoffs. Their lottery fate was already decided. They lost that game in rather convincing fashion, much to the chagrin of head coach Cheryl Reeve. Final score in that game, 87-72, and a decisive run finished that off. And the reason that was so important is it cost the Lynx a chance to have a better playoff seed. They wound up as the 6th seed out of the 8 teams that made the playoffs, but that means they have to play Connecticut now tonight in the first game of the best of 3. That's in Connecticut. The next game in Connecticut, if the Lynx managed to win one of those, Game 3, the decisive Game 3, would be back at Target Center next Wednesday, but a much tougher matchup than had they won that game against Indiana. They would be the 5 seed, get to play Dallas. Now, the Lynx have beaten Connecticut once in 3 tries this season, but Connecticut 27-13 on the season, one of the 3 very best teams in the WNBA, while Dallas would have been the opponent, a team that the Lynx just beat twice in the last few weeks. That would have been the opponent had they gotten the 5 seed to play in that 5-4 matchup. So Cheryl Reeve, head coach, president of basketball operations, was hot after the game. She was upset. She was mad at her team for what she perceived was a lack of listening to the game plan. Let's play just kind of the general clip of her talking about that aspect.
In the first quarter, we came out and we said, we don't trust you, coaches. We don't trust you. We don't trust that a team wants to be in the paint. Whatever their idea. They didn't trust us against Chicago as a 3-point shooting team. So it's rooted in trust. How do you come out in the first quarter and give up 20 points in the paint and then turn around and ask, oh, you want me to help? That you want that to be me? No, it's a complete lack of focus and intentionality. And for us competing for a playoff spot, it's not about learning. That's not about learning. That's about doing what you're told, what your job is, and trust your coaches and do what you're supposed to do.
Now, I think sometimes game planning can be a bit overrated. Talented players play and you're going to have instances where things just don't go your way. I don't know exactly what happened in this game. I do know the Lynx went 19-21 this season, and the 19 weren't the games where they listened to Cheryl Reeve, and the 21 weren't the games where they didn't listen to Cheryl Reeve. I'm sure there was a little bit of everything along the way where, talent takes over, execution takes over, things like that. But I get this, the overall sentiment of frustration was palpable. It was, voice was getting raised a little bit, the frustration of losing, knowing what was at stake. And you could tell why there was frustration. How that manifests now, though, is the big question. Now, it was suggested to Cheryl Reeve that maybe the Lynx should just kind of forget about that game, forget about the loss to Chicago, just move on to Connecticut. She did not like that idea.
There's no such thing as flushing what we did defensively for the last 2 games. Okay, that's babying them. Flush it. No, you need to sit in it because you had an opportunity to do something special. And twice, we didn't do what we needed to do. So there's no flushing. Sit in it and feel it.
Where does this all leave the Lynx going into tonight's playoff opener? That's what I want to know. That's probably what she wants to know. That's probably what players want to know. They still have an opportunity here, right? This season started 0-6. Looked like they were lottery bound. A lot of people suggesting, including myself, that they might be better off in the lottery with all those players available potentially in the 2024 WNBA draft. Instead, here they are in the playoffs. They missed last year after that really long, decade plus postseason streak. They're back this year. Still an opportunity, but they can't be feeling good about the way they enter things. Let's let one final thought from Cheryl Reeve. These were all post-game quotes from Sunday. All of these elicited from questions by Kent Youngblood, by the way, Star Tribune writer who does an excellent job and will be covering these playoff games as well.
Our level of understanding of what it takes to execute to win a possession is nowhere near where it needs to be successful in any game in the league, let alone go into the playoffs like you're talking about. We have no clue. The team that we're about to play in playoffs has a big-time clue. They have a big-time clue. It's what they do. They're a playoff team. It's what they do. We've got to, figure it out or, just go enjoy a trip to Mohegan Sun, I guess.
Does this motivate the Lynx? Does it not matter because, Sunday to Wednesday, did players even listen to this? I'm sure they got a version of this message, by the way, that was not available to the public, and maybe it was even harsher. I don't know. But how do they respond? That is going to be the question I want to see answered Wednesday and throughout the rest of however long this series lasts. The Vikings, meanwhile, we know what happened Sunday. They lost 20-17 to Tampa Bay, a surprising loss. Even though they weren't overwhelming favorites, I think they were like 5-point favorites going into the game. Like we've talked about, one of those games you kind of checked the box of this is probably a win. And when you lose those games, it's frustrating, especially in week 1 of the NFL season, especially with a short week at Philadelphia coming up right on the heels of it. The chance to start 0-2 now. That's not how you want to be starting a season. That's not what you want to be staring at. One of the big kind of subplots from that game, which I wrote about earlier this week, was Kirk Cousins, visibly upset at his quarterback's coach on the sideline after his late first half interception where he tried to fit the ball to KJ Osborne. Osborne had his hands on it. Maybe he could have led him more. Maybe he could have gone to Jordan Addison. Cousins got asked about that Tuesday at Vikings Access about the exchange that was caught on camera with him kind of reacting pretty strongly. We didn't hear what he said in the moment. We could see how he was reacting in that moment. Here's what he said about that on Tuesday.
Yeah, no, just passion and intensity is kind of the way I play the position, and that'll always happen from time to time after a series as I'm kind of processing it myself a little bit.
That's about what you would expect him to say, and I think it's probably pretty accurate, right? That's kind of what I wrote on Monday or earlier this week was, hey, these things do happen. I don't think this is like a sign of any kind of dysfunction. It's a sign of Kirk Cousins' frustration and the heat of the moment of wanting that play to be better, whether it was him doing something different, whether it's Osborne coming down without ball, maybe it's play design, maybe it's protection, and everything goes into that, which I'll get to here in a minute. But here was Cousins, too, kind of re-diagnosing a couple days after the fact what he maybe could have done or not done differently on that play.
Yeah, just kind of a bang-bang play and, worked TJ probably a little too long and then felt the void to KJ, but with the safety there, better to just progress to Jordan. Tried to stop KJ with the ball and really just should have let him through it and let him get blown up by the safety if it meant 6 points, and I was probably trying to protect him too much and then just get to Jordan and we can, get half of the yards we need and then play for the next play.
Now, also on Tuesday, I got a chance to ask Wes Phillips, offensive coordinator, a couple of questions. Wanted to get his point of view on that specific play, that interception to Osborne. Here was our exchange, my exchange with offensive coordinator Wes Phillips.
Wes, as you look back at that Kirk throw to KJ Osborne on the goal line, what did you, as you kind of look at the film, what did you see as in the progressions in terms of what his thought process and how that play turned out?
Well, it's not just an interception where you critique kind of reads, routes, splits, all those types of things, and certainly when something negative happens, it gets highlighted. But that is a play that we expect to be able to make. We didn't make it at that point. Without getting too specific into all of reads and those types of things and who did what and blaming anyone. But we know we can be better there.
When it ends negatively like that, do you have to go back to Kirk and say, we still want you to be aggressive in situations like that, or does he still feel comfortable making throws like that?
I think he's played enough football to understand and digest and process kind of what actually happened, and see it the right way to where he knows whether it's a correction from a receiver, whether it's himself, whether it was a pressure thing, I couldn't follow through. There's a lot of reasons why balls get intercepted. Unfortunately, it happened in the red zone, which, gets highlighted even a little bit more when you're taking points off the board. So, but like I said, we got to protect the football. I think we would have had a great opportunity to win that game if we would have done so.
So here's what I'm watching for this week. Like I said, I'm watching to see if the Vikings move on from that game, can learn from whatever mistakes they made, but also can, kind of use some of the pain of losing that game and figure out how to maybe pull out a surprising win in Philadelphia where they had a surprising loss to Tampa Bay. Same thing with the Lynx. Can they move past it? How much do you move past? How much do you learn? How much do you forget? How much do you internalize to make yourself better? And how much of this even matters 3 or 4 days after the fact? Is it just gone? Is it just on to the next one because each game is its own entity? I'm going to be watching for that, though, because these are big games for both of these franchises. Lynx back in the playoffs, an opportunity at Connecticut tonight to jump out in this series and take a series lead. Vikings a big chance in primetime Thursday to retake the narrative of their season, because right now the narrative went quickly from, hey, team that won 13 games last season and has high hopes for this season to, oh man, could be 0-2 right out of the jump, and then where do you go from there? So I'm watching to see how these narratives evolve from earlier in the week to right now.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
All right, let's bring in Randy Johnson right now, covers Gopher football for the Star Tribune. Big one on Saturday, Randy. You will, of course, be there. I'm actually also going out there as a spectator out to North Carolina, but definitely their best non-conference game on the schedule and a real opportunity to be tested in a lot of ways. I'm sure their defense will be put to the test. North Carolina's offense is awfully good, and we'll see if they can move the ball against an elite Power 5 school that's ranked right now.
Yeah, number 20, North Carolina. So it's they're coming off a 40-34 double overtime victory over Appalachian State. They were much more impressive in their opener. They beat South Carolina 31-17 or 31-14, and basically they're it's an uptick in athletes. It's like playing probably some of the better teams in the Big Ten West. Maybe not to the level of, say, of a Michigan or Ohio State, but a very, very good challenge for the Gophers. It'll be a really good gauge to see where they're at. They played much better in the second half of their win over Eastern Michigan. Really imposed the running game on Eastern Michigan with the freshman Darius Taylor running wild, especially in the second half.
With North Carolina, Drake Maye obviously gets a lot of the headlines, and he's been impressive early in the season. I mean, possible top 5 pick as a quarterback in next year's draft. From your perspective, what does he bring to the table, and what do they have to do to try to slow someone like that down? Because he's not the typical quarterback you're probably going to see even the rest of the season, probably. Yeah, he's your typical drop back passer, big guy. 6'4", 230, very accurate, and a really good runner. Last year, he rushed for right around 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. He passed for 38 touchdowns last year. This guy's he's got NFL tagged all over him. They haven't turned to him quite as much in the passing game so far. They've run the ball pretty well. He threw a couple picks in the opener against South Carolina, but he was pretty efficient against Appalachian State. From the Gophers' standpoint, we've seen them. We saw them against North Carolina. We saw them against Nebraska. We saw them throw the ball up and down the field and trying to establish that, thinking that was the way to beat the Huskers. And then obviously against Eastern Michigan last week, they, like you said, they imposed the run a lot more. At some point, I'm imagining they're going to try to find a better balance of the two in the game and not go whole hog on one versus the other in a game. Against North Carolina, though, how do you think that sorts itself out? I think what PJ Fleck really wanted to do against Eastern Michigan, he wanted the team to show him they can do that. That run the ball that way, because they will need to control the clock and run the ball when they're playing these higher ranked teams with very powerful offenses. That's always going to be a trait under PJ Fleck, is they do want to run the ball. Now they don't necessarily want to run it 75% of the time like they did, but he wanted to. He challenged his team. He wanted to identify who's going to be the running back. Turns out it's Darius Taylor. Sean Tyler was having a nice first half, but he put the ball on the ground 3 times, a couple times out of bounds, but still PJ Fleck counts those as fumbles in his mind. So he toward the end of the first half, he turned to Darius Taylor, who got some good tough yards. Then the second half, he got 149 of his 193 yards. So and what that did too, with that type of football, it kept Minnesota's defense on the sideline. Basically, Eastern Michigan only had 14 plays in the second half and gained only 4 yards, first. So if you're not turning it over on offense and the opposing offense is on the sideline, you got a pretty good chance to win. Did that sort out their running back picture for good, or just for the time being? Well, I think, it's tough to anoint the freshman, a true freshman and early enrollee. It's tough to anoint him as, the one after only one game, but it sure looks like he's going to get the bulk of the carries, or at least the if it's a 1 and a 1A, he's the one. They're not going to, they'll use Tyler probably as a very good compliment. He's not as big as Taylor. Taylor's a big, strong kid. Tyler's more of the shifty, get on the edges type of back, who can do a little bit out of the backfield with the receiving wise. So it could be a really nice compliment to each other. Can't really remember like the specifics of PJ Fleck and how he's handled running back situations, probably because Mo was here for so long. It was pretty obvious who was the guy. So I'm trying to stretch my memory and remember how he's either handled committees in the past or handled even like true freshman situations outside of running back. Is he the kind of coach where that playing time is reluctantly given, or is he say, if you are the guy, even if you are young and you're a true freshman, I will trust you with that role? I'm sure it depends on the situation too. You don't usually see like a true freshman offensive line get a lot of time. Lineman
Because they got to get bigger. They just have to get bigger, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah, but they do have one this year that we'll probably see playing in Greg Johnson soon. With running backs, I think he saw a good example of it back in 2021. Mo goes out in the first game. Trey Potts goes out later in the season. Bryce Williams out. He turned to Bucky Irving and Kai Thomas. And, he had to trust them. He was down to that, that level. But what you're seeing is, they have done a good job of recruiting running backs here. With Darius Taylor, you look at him. He was Michigan came after him strong toward the end, but he stayed true to Minnesota. Michigan State too. Also,
he's from Detroit, right?
Yeah, Detroit suburbs area. Yep.
Okay, so I mean so they were able to hold on to him after that, and so he must have had a pretty good idea too that he comes here is pretty wide open in terms of playing time competition. So there's an opportunity he could play right away too. Yeah,
definitely. That's it's a big selling point where kids want to play. That's no matter what the age they're not always waiting to bide their time.
As we think about college football, the Big Ten in general, we can talk about Colorado a little bit because that's a fascinating story, and they look every bit the part, and they had a pretty good bit of success against Nebraska after the Gophers struggled a little bit against Nebraska to get that win. But as we kind of see how the Big Ten and the Big Ten West is sorting itself out this year, any new information or any deviation from what you thought at the beginning of the year, or are we kind of on the same thought wave in terms of who the teams to beat are right now?
Yeah, Iowa's what I thought they were. They're going to play close, tight games with defense and beat you that way. Wisconsin, little surprised that not so much surprised they lost at Washington State, but they've given up as many points as they did out there. The one team surprised me the other way a bit is Illinois. They got drilled pretty big at Kansas, and then they had struggled early in their opener too. So it's some Illinois, especially maybe not quite what I thought as good as I thought they were going to be. I thought they might contend for the title basically I had them in a mix of four with Iowa, Wisconsin, them and the Gophers.
They're on the schedule this year, right? Or are they not?
Yeah, the West, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously they'd be on the schedule. So I mean, as we kind of think about establishing things, I mean, this is it's obviously not a conference game, but this is a game that I don't know, the statement game gets overused, but it kind of feels like a marker for them right now for the Gophers. They're 2-0, but the Nebraska win was far from convincing. It was more of a kind of the gutty kind of pulled it out at the end fashion, and then Eastern Michigan was a game they were expected to win. They were favored by like 20 points. So this does kind of feel like one where they're going to be tested in ways they just haven't been tested yet or shouldn't have been tested yet.
Yeah, they'll face the toughest offensive team they've had so far. Then they'll face a defense that's it's got a lot of Power 5 conference athletes on it. It maybe it's bent a little bit more than they'd like there, but I think they're it's a very good gauge, early season gauge. If they can go out there and play a tight game or win, you're looking at maybe they have something going pretty good. It's obviously you got Joe Rossi defense, and that's showed up so far. They've given up one touchdown this year. It's they're I don't think they're basically a touchdown underdog out there. It's understandable, but I don't think it's the situation where they're going to get blown out by any means.
Well, and especially with that defense, like you referenced, and is that I don't know, their secondary seemed awfully good in that Nebraska game, and they didn't maybe get tested quite as much against Eastern Michigan, but their defense has impressed me so far, and I didn't think they would be quite as good as they've been so far. Yeah,
they've gotten good play at that other quarterback spot from Trayvon Jones. So you got a good shutdown guy and Justin Waller there to begin with, and then obviously Tyler Nubin at the safety spot. The good news for the Gophers on defense this week, it looks like they're going to get Cody Lindenberg back from the injury that knocked him out of the first two games. So it would be surprising if he doesn't play. PJ was pretty optimistic yesterday in his press conference.
A lot of times it obviously comes down to quarterback. Maybe final thought here. I mean, we know all about North Carolina's Drake Maye. Nathan Kaliakmanis has, he's had his moments so far. He didn't have to do a whole lot against Eastern Michigan, but did a lot of the things he was asked to do pretty well. It's kind of a spotlight game for him too, especially if you consider who's on the other side of the field from him.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nathan has been he's been okay this year. He hasn't been what I call great. He's pretty much his own worst critic. He was not pleased at all with how he played against Nebraska, even though he did throw it 44 times. But yeah, he didn't like he thought he could be a lot sharper against Eastern. They only called on him 15 times to pass. So
right.
Pretty small sample size there. He's sometimes it seems like he might hurry things a little bit. Sometimes he'll throw a burner in there where maybe he need a little bit more of a touch. But I think it's just a learning process with him too. Really, he's been here a while, but he hasn't started that many games yet. So
seemed like the kind of guy that will relish the opportunity to go on the road in the non-conference play, a ranked team, and with what we know about Drake Maye. I mean, I think every player likes that opportunity, but I'm just thinking of him specifically. Like, how will he approach that moment, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. Ethan he doesn't lack for confidence, but he's not a guy that's braggadocious. He's pretty team oriented and everything. But you can tell there's a fire there that when he doesn't play well, he's pretty hard on himself.
Okay, well, it should be a fun game. Should be a fun weekend. Interested to see what the atmosphere out there is like. Their stadium's about the same size as Huntington, I think, like a little over 50, right?
Yeah, at the Keenan Stadium there. It kind of reminds me a bit of 2 years ago when they went out to Colorado and the Gophers fans, pretty much took that place over. I don't think they'll have that many in North Carolina like they did at Colorado, but I think it's going to be a very good showing for the Gophers fans. It's you just see it. It's a new place. They've never played there. It's a Power 5 program. It's an area of the country where Minnesotans might not get to that often. So I just really enjoy these non-conference games at places where I've never been, where the team hasn't been ever before, or even in that conference. They don't play ACC schools on the road very often.
Just wait, Randy. They'll all be part of one super conference at some point, and then they'll go to North Carolina like once every 5 years.
Oh, there we go.
We'll take it. All right. Appreciate it, Randy. We'll talk to you again next week and get the report from North Carolina, maybe our dueling perspectives, press box versus, I think we might be in the good seats, so hopefully I'll get a good view of everything. But appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Good stuff from Randy Johnson, as usual. I'll be watching Saturday, obviously, because I'll be there, but I'll be watching to see if Ethan Kalakmanis, the young Gophers quarterback, has a breakout game. Because I think, like Randy said, he's been okay so far this season, made some mistakes against Nebraska, but made some of those plays at the end that they needed to win that game. Wasn't asked to do a whole lot against Eastern Michigan, but this is a game where this is a step up in competition from either of those games, and he's got this hot shot on the other side, Drake Maye, this guy who could be a top 5 NFL draft pick. Where does Ethan Kalakmanis raise his level? Where does he manage the game and not get too overhyped? Things like that. So I'll be watching to see how he does that in this game. Let us finish now with the Coolers. Some thoughts on the Minnesota Twins. They beat Tampa Bay 3-2, a kind of a nice paint-by-numbers win with a good finish. It was Willie Castro providing the key offense, a 2-run home run in the 7th to get them the 3-2 lead. Short start by Joe Ryan, but a relatively effective one. Could be showing you right now the Twins' postseason playbook. We know the 1-2 in the rotation. I don't think we 100% know the order that they'll choose for Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. I've said already I think Lopez should go 1, Gray should go 2. Not because Lopez has been the flat-out better pitcher this year. Gray has a better ERA, but because Lopez seems like a candidate to go deeper into a game, and that's what I want from my Game 1 starter. You get Gray in Game 2, and then what do you do in Game 3? It kind of seems like the formula to me, at least at the moment, would be you start Joe Ryan, who can be pretty good for a couple trips through the order. He kind of stumbled again in this game a little bit when things got deeper into the 4th and 5th inning, still kind of working his way back from that midseason injury. Then you've kind of got an all hands on deck from there. Maybe it includes Louis Varland, who is excellent in his 2+ innings of relief on on Tuesday, helping the Twins in those middle innings, getting them to the finish line of a 3-2 win. Maybe it's Varland, maybe it's a little bit of Bailey Ober. I don't quite know exactly how they piece it together, but that could be a formula. Let Joe Ryan go as long as he's effective, but have a pretty quick hook in a Game 3. That worked for them against the Rays, got them their first win against the Rays this season, which brings me to my final point on the Twins, which is this. If the narrative in past seasons is that they couldn't beat good teams, that hasn't been the case this season. I'm just looking at American League teams right now. The 6 teams that are above them in the American League standings, including, the 4 teams that they could potentially play in the first round of the playoffs. We're talking about obviously not Baltimore or Tampa Bay. One of those teams is going to win the AL Central. The other one is going to be the first wild card. Then there's going to be, a second wild card. And then the third wild card is going to be someone out of probably Toronto, Houston, Texas, and Seattle. But of the 6 teams above them, including those 2 very good teams in the American League East, the Twins are 18-19 this season against those 6 teams. And again, that's not great, but that's basically 500. 1 game under 500, a chance to make it exactly 500 today in the finale of the series against the Rays. That tells me that this is a team that can compete with the very best teams in the American League. Maybe they're not dominant against them, but this is a team that goes into the playoffs, which aren't clinched yet, but are getting closer to being clinched by the day, that goes into the playoffs potentially with A, the pitching, B, the kind of home run offense that it's a little feast or famine, but that can win playoff games, and C, has shown this season that it can play with the very best teams in the American League. So that should give you a little bit of hope, a little bit of confidence. I know this has been such an up and down year. I know it's been a down and down postseason for the Twins in the last 20 years with that 18-game postseason losing streak hanging over them. But something to think about as you think about the playoffs. This is a Twins team built a little bit differently and maybe built to win a playoff game. And who knows, maybe a playoff series, and who knows, maybe even more than that. That will do it for me today. Chip Scoggins, like I said, Star Tribune columnist, joins me on tomorrow's show to talk Vikings and to talk about the return of his great weekly feature, Football Across Minnesota. Until then, I am Michael Rand. We'll see you again on Thursday.